Hey folks, let's go check eBay for some video games. Wait, who would even pay these prices? And why am I not enough to buy them? Oh yeah, disposable income. Game collecting is something I've done for well over a decade, and I love collecting games, experiencing and researching games I otherwise may have not known about thanks to the internet. But in recent years, these prices have gotten rough. Compared to 10 years ago, some of these prices have doubled, tripled, and in some cases, you have to sell off your firstborn to even get a copy of that super rare game, and you know there's a problem with Bubsy 3D on average goes for over $20. Yikes. I know this sounds like fantasy, but at one time and point, a lot of retro games were basically viewed as borderline garbage. Parents left them out because they were taking up space, giving away to your less fortunate cousins, not taken care of, yard sales for pennies, and so forth. But now that bubble has bursted, the demand is here, and it's not going away anytime soon unless everyone decides that video games are lame. Like that's gonna happen. Huh. There's a lot of reasons why things have gone the way they currently are, and I want to go over a few reasons why we're in this current state. Let's go over the big one first, and you're looking at it, the internet. The awareness for the well-known, obscure, new and old games have a much larger light shine on them here compared to your average life. Unless you had one of those weird friends that wouldn't shut up about those games. I was one of those guys in high school. But websites like Racket Boy, Retroware, Twitch, and of course YouTube let so many games basically come back to life. And not to say specific names, bigwigs on social media, YouTube, and video game websites, they even mention a game being a hidden gem, good, rare, or even doing a major bashing of a game. You better rush over to eBay or Amazon or miss out getting that game while it's still affordable, and that's assuming it's affordable to begin with. And while on the subject of the internet, that device in your pocket isn't just for receiving robocalls. If you want to look up for the price of anything that's ever existed, and now you easily can, with websites like price charting being well known, ignorance is a choice, and that's why you have yard sales early in the morning before they remember to check eBay prices. As well as with people reporting on rare and expensive games, if you were told some of the games you had in your closet or attic were worth money, would you try and sell it for the going price too? But you may be thinking, hey, what about the systems no one cares about like the N-Gage or the Atari Lynx? I say to you, I may have a problem. Oh well. But there are things an emulator can't do compared to real hardware, like you haven't lived until you're the clankiness of a Neo Geo Pocket Color's analog stick. And while I fully support emulation in ROMs, especially given some of these prices, I don't blame people for hunting down these systems, since not everyone wants to emulate their games, and considering some systems and games infamously don't emulate well, or just don't have one. Maybe one day, Bandai Playdia, you'll have your day. And since these don't have any other way to be played other than real hardware, you have to fork over the cash on the secondhand market. Then there's the other problem, unless the game is released both digitally and physically, there will always be a fixed amount of copies of that game and system available to be purchased. But even if a game is released only digitally, in theory you should be able to play on every system it was ever created for. But then we have the Scott Pilgrim problem of, will it stay in the store forever? Or will it be removed and almost never return until years of fan outcry bring it back? But let's pretend Ubisoft didn't re-release it ever and you couldn't emulate the game. You have to be some kind of savage and trade systems just to be able to play it. Like, that's the only way to play PT right now. Think about it. Painful, ain't it? Thanks, Konami. And while editing this video, Ubisoft and Limited Run Games have come together to give us a physical release. I'll take it. Speaking of licensed games, eventually thanks to the law, sooner or later licensed games have to be delisted unless the publisher wants to pay money for the license. And I'm gonna be fair here, if the price of the license is bringing less money than the game is currently earning, is it even worth keeping? Or the company that licensed out the franchise just doesn't want to renew the contract. And that's regardless whether it's a good game or not. Unfortunately, that means one day Hello Kitty Racer may be delisted from Steam. A shame. Really, I'm dying inside here. Outside maybe a reprinting, reproduction cart, or flash cart, that's it. There is no more copies. I haven't brought up this term yet, and we have the game collector. People who like to collect games, and as someone once put it, games are inherently collectible, with them sometimes being only playable on a system or two. We have a few kind of game collectors, like there are some people who collect what they plan to play, collect for the sake of collecting and filling a bookcase or 7 of them up, and then there's the ones who go a step further and are going for complete collections, going for garbage like Rascal to say they own all the PlayStation games. God help them. And then there's the last person that's not so much a collector, but buying video games as an investment to sell them off later down the road to make a quick buck. I can't blame them with video games being so expensive right now, but oh boy. I don't think that's the greatest idea down the road, but that's just me. Even for the ones not going for complete collections, and this applies to normal people too, if they have no intent of selling off their copy, and there is no pressure and shame in doing so, that's one more copy out of circulation. It's the old-fashioned supply and demand. As the amount of people that don't want to get rid of their copy increase, and the amount of people increase that want that game, well, something has to give, and the price has to increase too, unless the game gets re-released again. Let's buy a compilation disc, another system, digitally, or they find a warehouse full of that game. I can only hope the latter happens to Earthbound. Or you can always get a copy from a Chinese or Taiwan seller on eBay, but let's be frank here, like some assets on supermodels, I doubt they're real and made of cheap plastic. But here's a fact, there's a finite amount of any game laying around assuming there's no digital release, and a lot of these old games get broken, lost, batteries capacitors failed, destroyed by YouTubers for fun, and the list goes on. And this doesn't include the system itself to play it on, which some are infamous for easily dying like the Atari Jaguar CD. But I ask you, who's insane enough to own that? What, look, I might own a WonderSwan Crystal, but I'm not that insane. Yet. While there's one giant point a lot of people tend to forget, video games are popular, and are only getting more and more popular as each day passes. That's not to say video games weren't popular 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and so forth. The sheer amount of people makes the competition of getting a game they heard was good or interesting just harder. And when the other person has a deeper wallet than you, and is willing to spend the cash, sorry to say, you're fucked. Let's remove the physical aspect of everything and move into the mental aspect of video game collecting, and that's nostalgia. There's reasons why Nintendo shoves it down our throats in their games, and we love it. Sure, not everyone grew up with classics like Superman 64, but the classics like Super Mario Bros., World, Super Metroid, and Zelda will be evergreen titles and will always be in demand if people want them to relive their childhood, and people are willing to put down a large chunk of change for that. And while I feel this is a personal opinion, I feel if you're going to go out of your way to get a system you're nostalgic for, you might as well pick up an extra few titles that you heard were good. This final point's the only one that's tied to current events and will date the video in a couple years, but there's this thing called COVID. A lot of people were put into lockdown, and why not pass the time playing games? With some, it was buying a new system. Others, it was buying the system of their childhood to kill that time. I mean, if you were lucky and got a stimulus check and didn't need to worry about basic needs, you might as well spend on something that you can keep going back to. That bottle of booze you can only drink from so many times until it runs out, assuming any liquor stores are open during that time. This is tied with a point I made a second ago. There's way more competition to get those systems and titles since no one has anything better to do, and we have all that together, these prices go up and up as game collecting becomes more inclusive, sadly thanks to the price increase. But this does raise the question, will there be a price dip after COVID is done and everyone returns back to work in a normal life? I can't say for sure, but from a bit of experience when the game skyrockets in price, even when demand cools down some, it never gets back to the lows it once had. Sure, Sunshine did dip a bit in price when it got released on Switch again, but that doesn't count for the titles that will never happen for her again. Sorry, Chibi Robo, hope Nintendo remembers how to treat you well someday. Though I don't think they ever knew how to treat you well. And I don't even want to get limited releases today. Nintendo. I think that's all from me today, folks. I don't think I have anything left to say. I just hope one day we don't see a giant increase for Superman 64, because then we know for sure we're definitely on the wrong timeline. Seriously guys, thank you so much for watching the video all the way to the end. I usually stream on Twitch most days of the week, or if you have any additional points to be made how game collecting got so expensive, let me know in the comments, please. Or alternatively hit me up on Twitter, I'm usually there. But until next time everyone, take care, have a fantastic night, and see you in the next one folks.